Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Validity Podcast. I'm your host, Valentina Rodriguez, and we are officially starting season 2. So obviously, I took a little bit of a break from episodes towards the end of the summer after my summer classes ended, just to kind of recoup post-prep, post-grad classes, post kind of everything that I had going on. Obviously, last time we talked, I told you guys that I turned pro at nationals at the end of July. Since then, I turned 25, which is very exciting. And my grad summer classes ended just before my national show. So I feel like I kind of went through almost all the pertinent material that I possibly could have from my entire first year of grad school as a master's student at USF studying exercise science with a concentration in physique enhancement. So again, just to recap, my goal with this podcast really is to try to share everything that I learn at USF in this master's program that I think could be pertinent to you guys, to your physique goals, to your health goals, to your fitness goals, to any and everything, all of the above. And I really have scoured all my notes, and I think that I went through almost everything that was pertinent. Maybe there's a couple of little gems that I'll find here and there, like hidden things that I hadn't done an episode on, but for the most part, I think we covered all the important stuff. So looking ahead, this is just going to be a small little intro episode, and honestly, it's going to be a little bit of a different episode because we're not going to talk too much science outside of previewing what's to come. It's going to be mostly not so much personal updates, but I guess advice from my personal updates. So we're going to kind of invert. I know I always start with personal updates and then I get into the science, but actually right now we're going to talk about my semester to come because I do graduate in December. So this is my last semester of my master's program, which is crazy that I'm going to have a master's degree before the year ends. I am applying to PhD programs as we speak. I'm doing all the networking, trying to find the labs that most interest me, programs that most interest me, all of that. So I will give you guys those updates kind of as they arise, as I, film and record episodes week after week, because we are getting back into the weekly episodes starting today, literally starting this week. This is the start of season 2. So we're getting straight into the regular weekly episodes, and they will all have the science and the studies. This is just, I've only been in class 1 week, so we haven't covered actual content. So I wanted to just kind of take this episode, I wanted to take today to just kind of intro what's to come, touch base, couple updates, and then let you guys carry on with your life. So like I said, this is my last semester at USF. This is my last semester in my master's program, and I am taking technically 3 classes. One of them is a 4-hour stats course, and you will probably not hear about that at all in these episodes because you guys aren't here to learn statistics. It's a requirement for my program. It's a requirement for PhD programs. It's a requirement for people wanting to go on and apply to med school, to PA school, to PT school, to a lot of different things. It's also very important when it comes to understanding research as you're reading it, because you have to understand what kind of analyses were done. Because at the end of the day, whether statistically significant differences are found in these studies, that is dependent on the type of statistical analysis that was run. And you as a consumer of research, I as a consumer of research, have to be educated enough in these different methods of analyzing results statistically in order to determine whether the right statistical analysis was done and whether we can confidently believe or have just general confidence in the results being reported by the researchers. Because oftentimes, if you run the wrong statistical analysis or you run too many statistical analyses just to try to find a difference, like, you can use statistics to your advantage. So it's very important that as a consumer of research, we are able to discern and are able to be really critical about the analyses being run so we can actually determine whether we want to put our full confidence behind the results being reported and the differences supposedly being reported, etc. That being said, I don't foresee anything in this class being something that I could do a podcast episode on, because I'm not going to sit here and teach you about, like, this is how you run a chi-square test, because I don't, like, what? I want actual actionable things that you can go and implement when you're training, when you're eating, when you're doing your macros, when you're figuring out your goals, whenever you're trying to figure out your mindset. Like, that's my goal with this podcast. So that's stats. That's one of my classes. The other class that I'm taking is neuromuscular basis of exercise physiology. And I have a feeling all the episodes from this season are going to come pretty much exclusively from this class. If they don't come from neuromuscular, they're going to come from research reviews that I'm a part of. So groups where we get together with some of my professors, we go through current research, we criticize it, we analyze it, we dive deep into it, we talk about what the results mean, we talk about the study design. We do what we do basically on this episode with different research, and it might not be part of the neuromuscular curriculum because it's a completely different research review that I do sometimes, like a couple times a month. But for the most part, I do think neuromuscular is going to be the class where most of my podcast material is derived from. Obviously, I have full freedom with what I do in this podcast. So if a study comes out and it's not from anything related to what I do at USF in my master's program, whether it's a research review or a class, I obviously can and will still probably talk about it. But when it comes to actually directly giving you guys like a free master's education and sharing what I learn in my classes, this is probably the class that's going to have the most valuable content, at least for this semester. The last class that I'm taking is not really a class. It's just credits for independent study, which is essentially the research that I am leading and coordinating for Dr. Campbell as part of his performance and physique enhancement lab. So as you guys know from previous episodes, I am a research coordinator for Dr. Campbell, and I am leading the world's first reverse dieting study. And we are still recruiting. It's rolling recruitment. So if you are interested, I have the recruitment email in the description below. Just email that and we'll send back eligibility forms and a little bit more info about the study. But essentially, it is a massive virtual study. You can join from anywhere in the world. And we're essentially trying to figure out which, if any, of different post-dieting strategies help mitigate weight regain. So as a subject, you will have to undergo a maintenance phase, a dieting phase, and then you'll be randomly assigned to one of 3 post-dieting strategies, one of which will be reverse dieting as defined by a survey study that we conducted to try to figure out what the heck are people implementing when they implement a reverse diet, because it's something we hear about a lot in the field, something that's used a lot in bodybuilding and lifestyle clients. It's used a lot like in this space, but it's actually never been operationally defined in the literature. There's actually no studies on it in the literature at all. And our survey study was the first one to operationally define it. And we used that definition literally informed by how it's actually used in practice by practitioners, by coaches. And we use that to inform how we do the actual intervention as part of the study that I'm leading. So that is currently underway. Like I said, if you're interested in participating as a subject, then definitely shoot an email to reversedietstudy@gmail.com. Again, it's in the description, and we will get you all the information you need to determine whether you can be a part of the study. So those are the 3 classes I'm taking: stats, neuromuscular, and then the independent study, which is my research. So I've only been in class for a week. So stats was just kind of overview, intro. And then in neuromuscular, we did just kind of preview what we would discuss. So I thought I would share that with you guys so you have an idea of what different episodes might be about this season on the podcast. So a lot of things that we're going to be talking about in this class are going to be just looking at research and concepts that we don't actually fully know or understand or can definitively define, I guess, or yeah. And sometimes they're point of contention between researchers in the space, and a lot of times there's contradicting evidence, and that's why we talk about it, because it's kind of up to us to be critical enough when reading research to determine whether we can make a statement about these topics in either side of the debate. But some of those things are sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So for those who don't know, whenever you have a muscle fiber, you have myofibrils in there, and then you have the sarcoplasm, which is essentially the fluid surrounding the muscle fibrils. When we talk about increasing and growing your muscle, we typically like to think that it's an increase in the contractile tissue. So you're increasing the number of myofilaments. You have more actin, more myosin, so more contractile potential. But there is a theory that if you train for hypertrophy specifically and not for strength, then you are actually undergoing sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which is an increase in the fluid surrounding the myofibrils and not an increase in the myofibrils themselves. And there's debate as to whether sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is actually a thing, because whenever you get a pump, you get muscle swelling, and that's also an increase in the fluid surrounding your myofibrils. But it's a transient increase in the fluid, and it isn't accompanied by an increase in the different proteins that make up the sarcoplasm as well. So again, there is debate as to whether you would get an increase in your sarcoplasm without an increase in your actual contractile proteins. And we will be talking about that in this class. And we haven't gotten into the studies yet. Obviously, we just discussed that this is something we would discuss later in the semester. But that's something that we will probably have an episode on. And I think it's going to be a really interesting topic, because people who believe in sarcoplasmic hypertrophy and think that it's an actual phenomenon that occurs, they just propose that there's this increase in fluid surrounding the fibers, not an increase in the contractile tissue. And essentially that would suggest that bodybuilders who train for hypertrophy and not for strength, so think bodybuilders versus powerlifters, they are bigger, but they're technically weaker, and therefore they have a decrease in what we call muscle quality. So if you have more muscle, if your muscles are bigger, but they can't physically lift more because you don't actually have that increase in contractile proteins, then you theoretically have lower muscle quality if you're talking about the amount you can lift per the amount of muscle fiber that you have. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Anyways, another thing that we're going to talk about kind of tangentially related to sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is muscle density, which is just the packing of actin closer to myosin in a post-trained muscle. This used to be kind of like a metric that would be measured in training studies, which is the packing of those actual myofibrils in a muscle fiber. And we don't know if it actually changes due to training, but people throw around the term muscle density a lot. So we'll be looking at studies and determining whether we actually see that as an adaptation to resistance training. We're also going to talk about just how we measure the size of a muscle, because when you look at training studies that supposedly say, oh, this muscle grew, what is the measurement that you are founding that conclusion on? Because not all measurements are sensitive enough to determine whether growth occurred. If you are training a bicep over 8 weeks, you are not going to be able to detect that growth on a DEXA scan, which is a whole body assessment. You're definitely not going to be able to detect it on an in-body. You might be able to detect it on an ultrasound. If you're doing anthropometric measurements, which is essentially like tape measures, you probably won't be able to detect differences in bicep growth over like 8 weeks. So your study design and your measurement device is so critical and so important in being able to detect changes and therefore draw the adequate conclusions from your study. So I don't think people recognize enough the importance of study design and every element of study design, including measurement tool selection, when you are putting out research. And a lot of times people look at the results and then they try to compare results from this study to this study to this study, not even realizing that they all use different measurement assessments. They all use different study designs. And anyways, and that's another thing we're going to talk about this semester. We're going to talk about when growth occurs. I think historically there's this growth time course that has been put out there, which is essentially that the first few weeks, like 3 to 4 weeks of training, you don't get any growth. You just get neuromuscular adaptations where you get stronger. And then after those neuromuscular adaptations occur, where strength increases occur, then you see growth. And so it proposes that you don't actually see growth the first 3 to 4 weeks of training. But is that we're not like you can't grow in the first 3 to 4 weeks, you're only getting stronger? Or is it that we just can't detect the growth? Because again, measurement tool matters. So we're going to be looking through a lot of different studies, and we previewed some of them, but again, I'm just going to wait for the full episode to get into them when it comes to updating this time course of adaptations to resistance training, both on the strength and the size increase front. We are going to talk a little bit about molecular physiology. I believe that's actually on Thursday. We're going to start with molecular phys, and for me, that's the most exciting thing. I'm a molecular girly through and through. I know we've talked about Titan in episodes before, which is a molecular spring that essentially aids the eccentric part of the movement. It undergoes adaptations in regards to its stiffness, and it is thought to aid in hypertrophy, at least at the lengthened portion of a range of motion when it is most activated. But we are just going to get into molecular phys, which I think is going to give a good understanding just as to how muscles work in general when training, and then what adaptations we can expect based on like tracking those adaptations back down to the actual molecular pathway. That to me is like music to my ears. So if you're a molecular girly or a molecular king, just like me, then be very excited for that episode, because that will probably be one of the first ones, considering that that's what we're covering literally this week. And lastly, we're going to talk about mechanisms of fatigue. So central fatigue versus peripheral fatigue, whether it's perception or psychophysiological. We're going to talk about range of motion. I know we talked about that already in a previous episode, but we're going to get back into it. And then just strength. How do we get stronger? What is the mechanism of increasing your strength beyond just increasing contractile tissue? Because a lot of times we see people get stronger, like powerlifters, without necessarily getting bigger. So just exploring a lot of things that kind of remain, if not full unknowns, then at the very least remain points of debate or points of contention within the field of muscle physiology, resistance training research, etc. So that's what you guys can expect from season 2 outside of whatever new and emerging research comes out and is interesting and is worth an episode. But that's what you can expect at least from the classes, or at least from this class that I'm taking this semester. And then I guess, like I said, we were going to kind of invert the way I normally do things. I'll get into my personal updates now, and then I'll leave you guys to go on your merry way and enjoy the rest of your day. But in terms of personal updates, okay, so I am going to be 6 weeks post-show on Friday. So it's been almost 6 weeks since I turned pro. My reverse diet is honestly going incredibly. I have about 1 to 3 flexible meals or flexible days a week. Otherwise, I am killing my protocol like 100% to the gram. My food is pretty high. I'm not going to share my specific macros, but I would say it's definitely high. Like I did not expect to jump into a higher intake right away. I'm above 200 grams of carbs. Like my protein is higher, my fats are higher. Like I'm in a good place. And like I said, I'm killing that every single day that I am meant to. And then I'm taking my flexible days and enjoying date nights and girls' nights and just dinners. And it's just been a really lovely time of the balance that I didn't get to have for the past 26 weeks when I was prepping. So yeah, my cardio is down to 4 sessions of 15 minutes a week with an 8K minimum step count every day. So all in all, like I said, I feel like I'm in a really good place. And the only other thing is, so I actually did end up getting my period this past week, and I got it around 4.5 weeks post show, which to me is crazy because if you guys know and you've been following my Instagram or just following podcast episodes and like my little personal updates, you know that I've never been regular on a hormonal front. I've never been one to get regular menstrual cycles, and I ended up getting regular cycles during prep, which was really wild for me to become regular like in a prep. And then I didn't get my cycle in July as expected. I was like sub 10% body fat. Like my body physically could not produce a period in that state. But then I just got one, which would have been my August one. So I really only missed one period, which is just a great sign for hormonal health and just my regulating, I guess, post-show. But I will say it came with a whole host of symptoms. And I talked about this a little bit on my Instagram, a whole host of symptoms that I've personally never struggled with before. Like I've never struggled with these in any case. And I was struggling with them for like 3 to 4 weeks because essentially I was having a really, really, really robust like ovulation phase, and that came with symptoms I've never experienced before. And then I entered the luteal phase, which if you're a girl, you know. And that came with like, again, a whole host of symptoms that I've never experienced before. When I tell you that the biggest, most prominent one and most surprising one was the emotional dysregulation that I've experienced this past cycle. I'm not a super emotional person when it comes to like crying. Like I don't cry. Like I get emotional, but my body does not produce tears. I think I normally cry like 1 to 3 times a year, maybe 4 times a year I'll cry. And when I tell you guys that I have been crying every single day of essentially for the past 2 weeks, I've been crying every single day, and it just feels so crazy. I'm like, oh my God, like this just doesn't feel like me. It's the most bizarre thing. I'll cry over anything. I'll cry over a condiment. Like, and I mean hysterically bawling. It's kind of crazy. So that's one thing that I've been dealing with. And another thing that I've been dealing with, which is not as prominent, but it's I'd be remiss if I didn't obviously bring it up, is just my body getting softer. Like I knew this would happen, and it's expected, and it's part of the growing process, and it's part of this, and it's part of that. But it hasn't been obviously easy. Like I don't love seeing it get softer. And I know that it's also worse in my head because, full disclosure, I am still like on my quote unquote heavier days, like after a free meal or on just days where I woke up super fucking bloated from my period or this or that. I'm still within 1 to 3 pounds of my stage weight. So I know objectively I am in an okay place. Like objectively, I know that I haven't like gone off the rails or this or that. And honestly, I've really come to completely detach my behavior surrounding food from how my physique responds. Like I don't really connect the two. So it's not even that like if I'm getting softer, I'm like, oh my God, is it my free meals? Is it this? Is it that? No, because I look at my actions surrounding food. So whether I'm 100% on plan, how I handle my free meals, like flexibility, all of that, I attach that to the habit or the thought pattern that it is either reinforcing or not reinforcing. I don't allow my actions surrounding food, my thoughts surrounding food, I don't allow those to be tied back to how my body looks or how my physique will respond. I completely detach the two. I just look at How will this action reinforce or not reinforce a certain thought pattern? Is it one that I wanted to reinforce, etc.? And that's what helps me really adhere to protocol on basically every single day, perfectly to the gram. Like I just know the kind of thought patterns that I want to have, that I want to reinforce, the kind of athlete I want to show up as, the habits I want to instill. So I look at my actions as affecting that. On a completely separate note though, obviously I still am watching my physique change, and it's not like crazy changes. I'm still relatively lean. I still feel really good. My training is finally in a phenomenal place. Like I have flexibility, like I'm in a great place, but I'm obviously getting softer, and that is still mind fucking. I went from having like a skeleton diet face to like a normal healthy face. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, it looks like my face blew up. And I know that that's not true, but I have to remind myself that that's not true, because the instinct is to just be like, whoa, 6 weeks ago I was literally shredded. And it's like, well, yeah, like, but at the end of the day, if I wanted to be shredded, I would have to be doing a lot of fucking cardio and I'd have to be starving. And I don't want to do either of those things. So like, I will gladly take the softness at the expense of getting all this flexibility and freedom and date nights and girls nights and having time in my day again, because it's not being completely taken up by all this cardio and just having to be this. Like, it's been a good time. But what I wanted to talk about mostly, and I'm not going to get into it super in depth because I'm going to do a full YouTube video on this and a full Instagram post on this, but it is just my top tips for getting comfortable with weight gain, or at least pushing through the discomfort of a growing phase. Because I've gotten this question a lot. And if you guys didn't know, I got up to 130 pounds in my off season, and my peak week weights were between 95 and 98 pounds. So 30 something pounds of weight loss. I pushed through a lot of discomfort in my off season when it comes to just existing in a physique that was higher body fat than I was personally comfortable with. I came to Shelby, my coach, when I was binging, and I came to her from like a really hard place, and I kind of said, okay, I'm going to completely detach from what my body looks like, and I'm just going to do what she says and trust what she says. We recomped from 130 pounds down to 120, and then as we kept pushing food, obviously eventually entered growing phase, and we just kept growing and growing and growing, and my peak off-season weight went eventually back up to around 130 pounds before we started prep. So how did I mentally keep showing up, keep adhering, executing my protocol, eating my meal plan, my same 5 goddamn meals every single day, taking my free meals, as I'm watching the scale go from 120 to 121 to 122, 123, eventually all the way to 130, knowing damn well that I'm personally I'm not my most confident. I'm not live, laugh, loving in a 130 pound physique. For me, I'm 4'11 and a half. That is pretty high body fat percentage. I stepped on an in-body. My BMI theoretically was in the overweight category, bordering the obese category, I'm pretty sure. So and I say that only to show you, it is objectively a pretty high body weight for my size, for my stature. But I found a way to show up every single day, get excited about it, tick off every box, enjoy my weekly free meal, be present in my social life. Because in the past, if I wasn't comfortable in my physique, I would recluse, and I would not be a part of social events. I would let insecurity get the best of me, essentially. And I didn't do that. And I actually was I think as confident as I possibly could have been in a physique that objectively just wasn't my most comfortable. And I really attribute that to just, this is going to sound cliche and it's going to sound corny, and you guys are going to think I don't know what you guys are going to think, but I swear it's about believing in the work. In your off season, whenever you have slightly higher body fat, you are not going to be able to see the muscles growing. You don't have lines. There's a layer of adipose, of body fat naturally, as you should. There's a layer of body fat between your muscles and your skin. You're not going to be able to see your muscles the way that you see them when you're super, super lean and shredded. You're not going to be able to see the improvements week after week after week after week. You are basically not going to be able to obtain proof that the work you're putting in is actually amounting to the improvements that you're hoping to see. You're not going to be able to obtain that proof. At least not in a crystal clear way. So in your off season, whenever you are higher body fat and you're a little bit uncomfortable and you're just trying to find a way to keep showing up and keep putting in the work, you have to just put your head down and trust. Literally faith. It's the way you have faith in whatever religion you believe in. You don't have physical proof, but somehow you found a way to believe. I'm not trying to say that oh my God, training and lifting is your religion. No, but I think that the fundamental philosophy behind having faith in something is finding a way to believe in it without physical evidence, without physical proof. And that is genuinely what you have to have in your off season. In my entire off season, I would just put my hoodie on, put my hat on, put my headphones on, and I would just work. And I would just tell myself, at the end of this workout, I am closer to being a pro. And I remember I would post on my story, like, another leg day closer to being a pro, another delt day closer to being a pro, workout fueled by my burning desire to be a pro. Like even me just like posting those things on my story, as silly as it was, helped me. Even if it's like I'm gaslighting myself, even if it's like fake it till you make it, it really helped me frame everything as like, I am trusting. I am somehow trusting that at the end of this workout, I am one workout closer to being a pro. That at the end of this day, I am 5 meals closer to being a pro. That not even this day, that on the other side of this meal, because again, I was eating the same 5 goddamn meals. They were not very exciting. My food was high. At times I was like, okay, I don't want to eat this, but I'm going to. And I trusted at the end of this meal, I'm 1 meal closer to being a pro. Like I would just frame everything as not even questioning it. Like I would just tell myself on the other side of this task, whether it was when I had to get out of bed at like 11 at night because I was 200 steps short from my step count minimum and I would have to go pace my kitchen island, I would tell myself I am whatever my step count was for then, probably in my off season around 8,000. I would tell myself I'm going to get up and then I'll be 8,000 steps closer to being a pro. Like framing everything. And you just have to believe that. You have to cling on to that because you're not going to be able to obtain the physical proof. And I mean, like I said, I got pretty higher body fat than I'm comfortable in my off season. And I could not see tie-ins. I had a lot of quote unquote glute mass, but I hold a lot of body fat in my glutes. A lot of body fat in my glutes. So a lot of it was trusting. Like literally, I would just look at my glutes and I would be like, I cannot see what is muscle and what is fat. And I just have to trust that I am working as hard as I possibly can and that I'm working hard enough and that I'm giving my leg days everything I possibly can and that somewhere underneath this body fat, there's enough glute muscle mass to turn pro. And framing everything like that, like truly, I had no clue. It was just kind of like I guess we will see when I prep, but I'm going to give it my all right now because I have to believe that the only way I'm going to get there is putting in the work now. Like truly, I just believed in the work. I believed that every meal, every step, every workout, every set, every rep, every day that I executed and I gave it my all and I believed in the work, all those things were getting me that much closer to my goals of turning pro. And I mean, it did. And that's the craziest part because I think I've been trusting that and believing that and implementing that philosophy for the past 7 years in some capacity. But it truly becomes all the more important in an off season when you have to find a way to get yourself to show up in uncomfortable moments. So my biggest tips for a growing season, for pushing through the discomfort, for all of that is A, remember that it is temporary. Like the discomfort is temporary, but it is necessary. As uncomfortable as I was in my off season, I would not have done any of it differently because I do believe all of it was necessary to get me where I am today. So that's 1. And then 2, cliche, but I'm going to say it and I'm going to leave you guys with this. Believe in the work. You will never have a guarantee of your outcome, but you can guarantee that you will never get there if you don't put in the work. And I will take a 1% chance of achieving my goals over a 100% guarantee of never achieving them any day. So with that, I am so excited to be back recording regular weekly episodes. I'm really excited for all the science to come. I'm going to try to like weave in more like personal advice, kind of like chit-chats like this. Typically, I do these on my YouTube channel. And like I said, I'm going to go more in depth into like growing season and my personal experience and my advice and all of that in my reverse series on my YouTube channel. But I did want to put that advice at least on this platform somewhere. So I'm very excited, very, very, very excited for season 2. Very excited for everything to come with this podcast, with my personal projects, with my professional endeavors, with my academic endeavors, just with my life. Like I'm so excited to undergo those myself and to be able to share them with you guys here on this podcast and this platform and just to continue learning and growing and educating together. So Thank you guys for listening. As always, if you have any questions, you can email me. All my emails are linked below. My personal Instagram is VallFitt_IBBPro. All personal prep updates, show day vlogs are live on my YouTube channel. If you want to be a part of the reverse dieting research study, then definitely email reversedietstudy@gmail.com. Again, everything is in the description. And other than that, I will see you in the next episode.